In the early hours of October 13th, 1972, Fairchild FH-227D Flight 571 departed Montevideo, bound for Santiago, Chile, carrying 45 people, including 19 members of the Old Christians Club, a group of amateur rugby players, and their friends and family. After takeoff, contact was lost with Flight 571. No distress call was sent nor received, but 2 days later, a Chilean Air Force search team located the wreckage of the Fairchild FH-227D high in the Andes Mountains, seemingly out of nowhere. To the horror of the rescue team, they found 126 feet of fuselage and human remains strewn across a narrow mountain ridge at an elevation of 12,000 feet. Of the 45 people on board the plane, only 16 survived. How did these 16 people survive 72 days in one of the most brutal and unforgiving environments on Earth? This is the story of the miracle in the Andes. On the evening of October 13th, 1972, a heavy mist hung over the Andes Mountains. As the plane's pilot, Captain Jorge Canessa, began his descent into Santiago, he trusted the accuracy of his instruments rather than relying on his visual cues. In the dark cloud cover, however, the plane was not where the pilot thought it was, but instead was dangerously close to a 12,000-foot mountain ridge. At 1:30 a.m. on October 14th, the Fairchild FH-227D's right wing struck a mountain peak. This caused the plane to lose altitude rapidly. With the loss of the right wing, the tail separated from the fuselage and both went over the top of the mountain. As the fuselage slid down the glacier, it hit rocks so hard that it broke into 3 pieces. Miraculously, a section of the plane containing 27 people remained intact as it slid across the glacier and came to a stop at the bottom of a crevasse. Of the 45 people on board, 3 crew and 9 passengers died on impact. Another 8 succumbed soon after from cold and injuries. When the survivors regained consciousness, they realized the magnitude of the disaster. They had crashed in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by icy mountains and covered by thick clouds. There was no hope of rescue. The weather was too bad for any search and rescue operation. And even if the weather cleared, the crash site was in such a remote area of the Andes that it would take days for rescuers to find them. Stranded without hope of rescue, the survivors were facing the harsh realities of their situation. The cold was intense, the food and water supplies were limited, and the darkness was absolute. Still, they tried to make the best of a terrible situation. They huddled together for warmth, rationed their food, and melted snow for water. The few blankets and coats available were distributed among the passengers and the injured, with the hope that they could keep warm enough to prevent hypothermia. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. The survivors started to succumb to the harsh environment. Avalanches buried parts of the wreckage and some of the survivors. Frostbite set in, and the injured passengers grew weaker. By late October, only 33 passengers remained alive. Many were too weak to do anything but lie down and wait for the end. On November 1st, the survivors made a grim discovery. The last of their food rations were running out, and death loomed closer than ever. The question was, how much longer could they survive? Faced with the agonizing prospect of starvation, the survivors made an unthinkable decision to consume the bodies of the deceased passengers in order to stay alive. While this practice is taboo in many cultures, the survivors saw it as a necessary measure to sustain themselves. They used every part of the body, including the fat around the organs, which they considered a delicacy. They believed that eating the remains of their loved ones was a way to honor them and ensure that nothing went to waste. Despite the horrific circumstances, the survivors managed to maintain a sense of routine. Each morning they woke up with the rising sun and cut up the remains of the deceased passengers. They then melted snow for water and distributed it among the sick and thirsty. Throughout the day, they engaged in various activities to pass the time and lift their spirits. Some prayed or sang religious songs, while others wrote messages to their families or drew pictures of their loved ones. They also kept busy with games and exercises to maintain their strength and sanity. In the evenings, the survivors gathered together and shared stories about their lives before the crash. They reminisced about their families, friends, and jobs, trying to hold on to their memories and identities. They also discussed their hopes for the future and expressed their love and support for one another. On December 12th, two survivors, Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa, decided that they could not wait any longer for rescue. They knew that death was certain if they stayed with the group, so they made a desperate plan to escape and seek help on their own. Improvising climbing gear from seat belts and portions of the fuselage, they scaled 1,000 feet of ice to reach a ridge above the crash site. Over the next 10 days, they crossed 35 miles of jagged peaks and crevasses, battling altitude sickness, frostbite, and exhaustion. Guided only by improvised maps drawn in the snow, they descended into valleys and climbed over passes, hoping to find a way out of the mountains. By December 22nd, both men were suffering from severe frostbite and their feet were in terrible condition. But they pressed on because they knew that death awaited them if they turned back. Just when all hope seemed lost, Parrado and Canessa stumbled upon a lone Chilean shepherd named Sergio Catalan. Catalan, who had been searching for his missing dog, was shocked to find the two emaciated survivors. Without hesitation, he offered them water and helped them build a fire to warm up. When the shepherds realized the next morning that the plane crash survivors were still alive, he alerted the authorities. On December 23rd, helicopters arrived at the crash site and airlifted the 14 remaining survivors to safety. Of the 45 people who had boarded the plane in Montevideo, only 16 had survived 72 days in one of the world's harshest environments. The news of the survival of the Andes plane crash spread around the world. People were amazed by the resilience and determination of the survivors who had managed to endure one of the most horrific experiences imaginable. But the ordeal was far from over for the survivors. When they returned home, they were greeted with celebrations and media attention. However, they soon realized that their ordeal had taken a heavy toll on their mental and physical health. Many suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, survivor's guilt, and other psychological issues. They also faced physical challenges as a result of their injuries and exposure to the elements. Despite the trauma they had endured, the survivors were determined to move forward with their lives. They reached out for counseling and medical treatment and slowly began to heal. They also found solace in their shared experience and the support of their families and friends. The survivors of the Andes plane crash became known as the Miracle of the Andes. Their story captured the world's attention and inspired numerous books, documentaries, and films, including the 1993 film Alive, which depicted their harrowing ordeal. The survivors also became symbols of human resilience and determination. Despite being faced with unimaginable adversity, they had managed to survive against all odds, and their story continues to inspire people around the world today. Today, the crash site lies thawing due to climate change. According to Time magazine, this is forcing glaciers in the Andes to recede faster than at any point in the past 150 years. For decades, the frozen terrain of the crash site preserved the site as a tomb, protecting the memory of those who perished in the crash. But now the site is changing, forcing us to confront the impact of climate change on our natural and cultural heritage. You can see this phenomenon for yourself at any time by visiting Google Earth. What do you think about this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this episode. If you want to watch more interesting videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. This is the incredible story of Julian Köpke, the sole survivor of Lancer Flight 508. On December 24, 1971, 17-year-old Julian Köpke boarded Lancer Flight 508 with her mother, Maria, traveling from Lima to Pucallpa, Peru. Her father, Julian Köpke, was a renowned German-Peruvian zoologist who had been invited to give a talk at the National University of the Amazon. After dropping off her father at the airport in Lima, her mother bought 2 tickets for them on the same flight. As the domestic flight got underway, Julianne settled into her seat and prepared for what was supposed to be a quick 1-hour flight through some cloudy weather. But as they were cruising at 31,000 feet, things took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, the plane was violently shaken by turbulence that the pilot announced was due to a severe thunderstorm. Throughout the next few minutes, the cabin lights flickered ominously before plunging the plane into total darkness. The last thing Julianne remembered was a blinding flash of light, followed by excruciating pain. When she awoke, she found herself lying on the forest floor with a broken collarbone, a deep gash on her right arm, an eye injury, and a concussion. Disoriented and traumatized, she looked around to find that she was completely alone in the middle of nowhere. It was only then that she realized that she had fallen from the plane. Julianne had miraculously survived a fall of approximately 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet from a small plane into the Amazon rainforest. But how did this happen? You're about to find out. As it turned out, the aircraft had been struck by a bolt of lightning, which caused the plane to disintegrate mid-air. Julianne was still strapped to her seat and had somehow been ejected from the plane during the incident. While falling through the sky, she must have lost consciousness because she had no recollection of the terrifying plunge to the ground below. But incredibly, when she came to, she was alive. What made her survival even more remarkable was the fact that the dense foliage of the rainforest had cushioned her descent. Had she fallen onto solid ground, there's no doubt that she would have been killed instantly. But luckily for Julianne, she landed in a part of the jungle where tall trees had broken her fall. Now dazed and confused, she struggled to free herself from the wreckage of the plane. Although injured and scared, Julianne managed to make her way out of the debris field. That's when she noticed that she was all alone. Her mother was nowhere to be seen, and neither were any of the other passengers and crew members. With a mix of adrenaline and fear driving her, Julianne set off into the dense undergrowth. With each step, she pushed away the thought that she might be the only survivor of the crash. As darkness began to fall, the young girl's physical wounds started to take their toll on her. Insect bites covered her body, and she felt increasingly hungry and thirsty. To make matters worse, she soon realized that her right arm was infected, and she could tell that if something wasn't done to treat the wound, it would get much worse. Fearful but resolute, Julianne pressed on, determined not to give up hope. But despite her brave efforts, the days that followed were filled with hardship. Not only did she have to contend with the physical pain and mental anguish, but she also had to navigate through thick vegetation and cross fast-flowing streams. But throughout it all, Julianne refused to succumb to despair. Instead, drawing on the survival skills that her parents had taught her, she pressed on. As it turned out, her parents' teachings proved invaluable, as they had taken her on numerous expeditions through the Amazon when she was younger, and had trained her in jungle survival techniques. This knowledge helped Julianne endure the ordeal, and it gave her the strength to keep going. Then, on the 11th day, Julianne's life finally turned around. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she stumbled upon a boat Juliana's story captured the attention of the world. As the sole survivor of Lancer Flight 508, she became a symbol of resilience and determination. When the news broke that all 92 people on board the flight had perished, including Julianne's mother, the world was stunned. Her father, who had narrowly missed the flight due to a change in schedule, was among those who rushed to offer their support and comfort. In the face of such tragedy, Julianne's survival seemed almost miraculous. It raised questions about human resilience and the extraordinary will to live. People marveled at how she had managed to survive the fall and then navigate the treacherous jungle for 11 days without food or water. But amidst the shock and disbelief, there was also a growing sense of wonder at how Juliana had managed to survive for so long. As doctors worked tirelessly to treat her injuries, her story became a beacon of hope for many. Her recovery was nothing short of remarkable, and it captivated the world. Each new milestone in her recovery was met with joy and celebration. In the months following the crash, Juliana underwent extensive physical and psychological treatment. Her injuries were serious and required long-term care. But throughout it all, she displayed an indomitable spirit. With the love and support of her family and medical professionals, she slowly regained her strength. As Juliana recovered physically, she also began to grapple with the emotional and psychological impact of her ordeal. The trauma of losing her mother and the harrowing experience of surviving alone in the jungle took a heavy toll on her. But with the help of therapists and counselors, she slowly began to heal. In the years following the crash, Juliana's story continued to captivate people. Her bravery and resilience became a source of inspiration for many. She became a symbol of the indomitable spirit of humanity and the power of the human will to survive against all odds. After the accident, Juliana pursued studies in biology, inspired by her father's work in the field. She became a vocal advocate for the protection of the Amazon rainforest and the preservation of its biodiversity. Her personal experience of the jungle's resilience and ability to sustain life deeply affected her perspective. And while the tragic events of that fateful flight forever left a scar on her mind, Juliana refused to let the tragedy define her. She channeled her experiences into a lifelong commitment to conservation and education. Her story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life, but also the incredible strength and adaptability of the human spirit.